In architecture, there is a golden rule. Form follows function. A bedroom is for sleeping. A kitchen is for cooking. A hallway is for walking. But in 1893, on the corner of 63rd and Wallace in Chicago, a building rose that defied all logic. It had doors that opened into solid brick walls. It had staircases that led to nowhere. It had bedrooms equipped with gas pipes that didn't provide light, but rather choked it out. This wasn't just a hotel for the World's Fair. It was a machine. A factory designed for one specific product. Death. They called it the White City. The 1893 World's Fair was a shining beacon of American progress. It was electric lights, invention, and wonder. Millions flocked to Chicago to see the future. But just 3 miles away, in the shadow of the Ferris wheel, a different kind of structure was operating. While the world looked at the light, a man named H. Holmes was inviting them into the dark. And once you checked into his hotel, you never checked out. When the Chicago police finally broke down the door to the basement, they didn't know what they were looking at. They found a kiln large enough to hold a human body. They found vats of corrosive acid. They found a table that looked disturbingly like a surgeon's slab. They realized too late that the entire building was a weapon. This is the story of the Murder Castle, the only hotel in history built specifically to kill its guests. To understand the castle, you first have to understand the landscape. Chicago in the 1890s was known as the Devil's City. It was a place of smoke, slaughterhouses, and strangers. Trainloads of people arrived every single day, leaving their past lives behind to see the World's Fair. It was a city of transients. It was the perfect place to disappear. Enter Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. To the public, he was a charming pharmacist and a visionary businessman. But privately, he was a predator who looked at this sea of strangers and saw an opportunity for profit. Most serial killers hunt in the wild. They stalk parks or dark alleyways. Holmes was different. He didn't just hunt. He built a trap. He constructed a 3-story hotel specifically designed to facilitate murder, disposal, and monetization. Welcome to Hidden Killers. Today, we are not just analyzing a killer. We are analyzing his creation. We are going to walk the halls of the Murder Castle. We will examine the gas chambers, the greased chutes, and the basement labyrinths to understand how one man turned architecture into an instrument of terror. Here is the blueprint of the beast. To understand the machine, you must first understand the factory floor where it was built. Chicago in 1893 was not just a city. It was an explosion. It was the fastest-growing metropolis in the world, a place where the population had doubled in just 10 years. It was known as the Devil's City, a nickname earned by the relentless grime of the Union stockyards, where millions of cattle were slaughtered every year, filling the air with the stench of blood and burning fat. But in the middle of this industrial nightmare, a dream was rising. The world's Columbian Exposition. The World's Fair. It was designed to be a white city of neoclassical architecture, electric lights, and civilized wonder. It was a magnet that pulled in 27 million visitors, nearly half the population of the United States at the time. This influx of humanity created a unique predator's paradise. Thousands of young women were arriving from small towns, looking for work as stenographers or shopgirls. Wealthy widows were arriving for the spectacle. They were all strangers in a strange land. They had no family nearby, no support systems, and often plenty of cash in their pockets. H.A. Holmes, a handsome and charming pharmacist, looked at this chaotic sea of transient faces and saw a business opportunity. He realized that in a city where thousands of people arrived and departed every day, a few missing persons would simply be swallowed by the noise. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to harvest. He needed a location that was close enough to the fair to attract tourists, but far enough away to avoid scrutiny. He chose the corner of 63rd and Wallace in the Englewood neighborhood, a strategic choke point for the incoming crowds. Here, he would build his masterpiece. In 1887, Holmes purchased the empty lot. He was a pharmacist by trade, but an architect by obsession. Most serial killers are opportunists who strike when the moment is right. Holmes was a planner. He sat down and sketched the blueprints for a building that would serve a dual purpose. On the surface, it would be a respectable retail space with apartments for the influx of World's Fair visitors. Beneath the surface, it was a slaughterhouse. The structure was massive block long and 3 stories high. Holmes added a false battlement on top, a wooden turret that gave the building the appearance of a fortress. The locals, impressed and slightly intimidated by its looming presence over the low-rise neighborhood, dubbed it the castle. Holmes didn't hire a professional architect to design the interior. He designed it himself. This is the crucial detail that separates the castle from any other crime scene in history. The design wasn't just bad or confusing. It was malicious. Every angle, every hallway, and every room was calculated to facilitate control. He designed the building to be a filter. The public could enter the first floor and see a normal, bustling business. But only the chosen victims would ever see the true nature of the second floor. He designed it to restrict movement, to disorient the senses, and to trap the unsuspecting. It was a physical manifestation of his own twisted mind, charming and respectable on the outside, labyrinthine and deadly on the inside. He poured his fortune into the construction, buying high-grade bricks and steel, because he knew that once the doors were locked, the walls needed to be soundproof. How do you build a murder house without the builders calling the police? If you ask a carpenter to build a stairway that leads to a ceiling, or a mason to brick up a doorway that was just installed, they are going to ask questions. Holmes solved this problem with a strategy of compartmentalization. During the construction of the castle, Holmes hired and fired a revolving doors. He would hire a crew of carpenters to frame the walls. After 2 weeks, he would fire them all, screaming that their work was shoddy and refused to pay them. Then, he would hire a completely new crew to install the doors. Then a third crew for the gas lines. Then, a fourth for the plastering. This served 2 diabolical purposes. First, it saved him a fortune. Holmes was a pathological conman who believed paying debts was for fools. He sued and was sued constantly. But more importantly, it meant that no single builder ever saw the master plan. One carpenter might build a hallway, but he didn't know it led to a brick wall. Another might install a gas jet, but he didn't know it wasn't connected to a light fixture. Only Holmes possessed the master key to the puzzle. The building was a secret kept by hundreds of men who didn't even know they were keeping it. The layout was so confusing that even the neighbors who watched it go up couldn't figure out the floor plan. It was a chaotic mess of construction that somehow coalesced into a functioning trap. The ground floor of the castle was the mask. It was designed to look aggressively, reassuringly normal. Holmes opened a pharmacy on the corner, which became a community hub. It was well lit, stocked with tonics, perfumes, and sodas. There was a jewelry counter where he sold watches. There was a restaurant. It was a bustling commercial space where Holmes played the role of the benevolent doctor. He would stand behind the counter, charming the ladies, selling cures for headaches, and giving candy to children. He was handsome, blue-eyed, and soft-spoken, the very picture of a Victorian gentleman. This normalcy was the camouflage. If a woman went missing, who would suspect the nice Dr. Holmes at the pharmacy? The ground floor established trust. It was where he scoured his victims. He would offer them jobs as assistants, typists, or bookkeepers. Or he would offer them a room in the hotel upstairs at a discount rate for the World's Fair. Why stay in a crowded boarding house, he would say, when you can have a private suite at the castle? They would trust him. They would walk up the stairs, leaving the safety of the public street, and cross the threshold into the kill zone. The transition was instant. One moment, you were in a pharmacy smelling of peppermint and rubbing alcohol. The next, you were in a dark, Windowless corridor where the air was stale and the sound of the street was muffled by layers of brick and soundproofing. The second floor was the heart of the monster. This was the hotel portion of the building, but it looked less like a hotel and more like a funhouse nightmare designed by a madman. There were 35 rooms and 51 doors on this floor, but the math didn't add up. If you were a guest walking these halls, you would feel a creeping sense of wrongness. The hallways were narrow and dimly lit by gas lamps that flickered in the draft. The layout was intentionally confusing. Some doors opened onto solid brick walls. Some doorways were fitted with heavy iron plates, like prison cells. There were hallways that turned at sharp angles and then simply dead-ended, forcing you to turn back. There were blind rooms with no windows, located in the center of the building, completely cut off from sunlight and sound. The layout was designed to disorient. Once you were inside, you lost your sense of direction. You couldn't tell where the street was. You couldn't tell north from south. If you tried to run, you might find yourself trapped in a closet or facing a wall. It was a psychological weapon. Holmes wanted his victims to feel confused and helpless before the end. It was a maze, and he was the Minotaur, the only one who knew the path to the exit. But the architecture wasn't just confusing. It was active. Several of the bedrooms on the second floor were fitted with gas jets. In a normal 1890s home, gas was used for lighting, and the valve would be inside the room so the occupant could turn it on or off. In the castle, the valves for these jets weren't in the rooms. They were controlled from a panel in Holmes' master bedroom or his office. He could lock a guest in their room from the outside, turn a valve in his own suite, and flood their room with lethal gas. He didn't even have to be in the room that killed them. He could go to sleep while they suffocated, waking up the next morning to a silent hotel. There was also the bank vault. Holmes had a massive walk-in safe installed in his office. He told the installers it was for storing sensitive documents and chemicals. But the safe was airtight and soundproof. It was big enough for a person to stand in. He would trick victims into entering the vault, perhaps asking them to retrieve a file or force them inside, and then spin the lock. We know of at least one victim, Emmeline Sigrand, who is believed to have died in that vault. Police later found a shoe print etched into the inside of the door, evidence of her desperate kicking as the oxygen slowly ran out. It was a tomb located right in the middle of an office, a metal box of terror hidden in plain sight. Once the deed was done, Holmes faced a logistical problem. How do you move a body from the second floor to the basement without being seen? Carrying a body down a staircase is difficult, messy, and risky. If a guest opened their door at the wrong moment, the game would be over. So, Holmes designed a disposal system that rivaled an industrial slaughterhouse. Hidden behind false walls and inside innocuous-looking closets were greased chutes. These were large laundry chutes, specifically widened to accommodate the human form. These chutes bypassed the ground floor completely and dropped directly into the basement. Holmes could kill a victim in the gas room, drag them a few feet to the closet, and push them into the darkness. Gravity did the rest. Within seconds, the evidence was removed from the living quarters and deposited safely in his subterranean laboratory. This system allowed for an assembly line efficiency. It separated the killing floor from the processing floor. It ensured that the hotel always appeared clean and orderly, no matter what horrors were occurring in the cellar below. It was the ultimate architectural expression of his detachment. Human beings were just cargo to be moved through a chute. The basement was the factory floor. If the upstairs was the trap, this was the slaughterhouse. When the police finally raided the castle in 1895, the basement was the room that gave them nightmares. It was a cavernous, dimly lit space filled with tools that had no place in a pharmacy. They found a dissecting table covered in dried blood, identical to those used in morgues. They found vats of corrosive acid and pits of quicklime, chemicals designed to eat away flesh and bone in a matter of hours. But the centerpiece of the basement was the kiln, a furnace large enough to incinerate a human body to ash. Holmes had the capacity to make people vanish completely. But sometimes he didn't want them to vanish. Holmes was a businessman above all else. Police found evidence that he was stripping the flesh from his victims' bodies to clean the skeletons. Why? To sell them. In the 1890s, medical schools paid top dollar for articulated skeletons. Holmes would kill his victims, process their bones in his basement factory, and then sell their remains to universities, claiming they were imported specimens. He monetized every part of the murder. He turned his victims into inventory, squeezing the last dollar out of them even after death. Who were the people who vanished into the chutes? They were the new women of the 1890s. They were independent, adventurous, and looking for a new life in the big city. Julia Cunner moved into the building with her husband and daughter. She and her daughter Pearl both vanished. Emmeline Cigrand was the beautiful blonde stenographer who worked in his office. Minnie Williams was an heiress from Texas. Holmes had a specific type, but it wasn't driven by lust. It was driven by greed. He seduced women who had life savings, property, or inheritances. He would charm them, woo them, and often marry them in bigamous ceremonies. Once he gained control of their assets, they would simply ... disappear. He would tell the neighbors and the other hotel guests that they had gone on a trip to California or Europe. In the transient, chaotic world of the World's Fair, people accepted these stories. Neighbors were used to people coming and going. The castle was a black hole that swallowed them up, and the city was too busy celebrating the electric lights of the fair to notice the darkness growing on 63rd Street. Ironically, it wasn't the mass murders in the castle that brought Holmes down. It was a simple insurance scam. After the World's Fair ended, the hotel sat empty. Holmes, desperate for money, burned the top floor to claim the insurance, but the investigators were suspicious. He fled Chicago and went on the run. He attempted one last scam involving faking the death of his partner, Benjamin Petezel, to collect a $10,000 policy. But Holmes didn't fake the death. He actually killed Petezel. The Pinkerton Detective Agency tracked him across the country, finally arresting him in Philadelphia. When police backtracked his movements to Chicago, they broke into the castle. The discovery of the acid vats, the lime pits, and the human remains shocked the nation. The press dubbed it the Murder Castle, and diagrams of its layout were printed in papers globally. But the building didn't survive to become a monument to evil. In August 1895, while Holmes sat in a prison cell, the castle was gutted by a mysterious fire. Witnesses heard explosions, suggesting arson. The roof collapsed, and the secrets of the upper floors were consumed by flames. The shell remained for years, until it was demolished in 1938. Today, a U.S. post office stands on the site. People walk in and out every day, mailing packages, completely unaware that beneath their feet lies the foundation of the most sophisticated murder machine ever built. Today, if you go to the corner of 63rd and Wallace in Chicago, you won't find a castle. You will find a U.S. post office. People walk in and out every day, mailing packages and buying stamps, completely unaware that they are standing on top of the infamous kill floor. H. Holmes was a monster, yes. But the terrifying legacy of this story isn't the man. It's the building. He proved that architecture itself can be a weapon. It forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. When you walk into a hotel, or a new apartment, or a strange house, do you really know what's behind the walls? Do you know where the doors actually lead? Holmes showed us that the scariest trap isn't a dungeon. It's a bedroom with a lock on the outside. I want to hear from you. If the Murder Castle were still standing today as a museum of true crime, would you be brave enough to step inside? Or would you stay far away? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this architectural deep dive into hell, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical macabre. We have plenty more blueprints to unroll. Sleep well. And check the lock on your door.